people and peatlands are connected. We've always been connected to our peatlands. For over 400 years we've gone to our bogs and we've harvested turf. We have to remember at that part of the early part of the 20th century was a very different part of Ireland than we look at today in 2021. In the early part of the 20th century, many homes, particularly in rural Ireland, had no electricity. There was no, we cooked our food over the fire, and the peat fire was very important. So then you come on and, after World War II, and we're an emerging country, and we establish an industry. We create jobs with it. We create an economy around our peatlands that, supported families. So peatlands have always been part of Irish people.
I just love it. It's always been in the family, so I think it somehow passes down through the generations, the love of it and the learning. My little piece here is 4 acres, as I said, and it's an oak forest, so we have lots of emerging oak trees, and they're starting to naturalise now. I have a little piece of wet bog that we've already looked at re-wetting, but unfortunately it's too far. My bog is in transition, but it's beautiful for what it is.
I just love being here, I suppose, for lots of different reasons. Every time you come it's different, every season is different. Like Tim, I'm interested in insects and birds and plants mostly though. I just find it fascinating, all the bog plants, what they, how they adapt to a very tough environment. And I suppose then there's the whole people side of it as well.
I want to see it preserved now because of its importance in climate for the future, because I worry about my grandchildren. What does life hold for them with climate change?
Yeah.
So I want to see it preserved, even though I
the main thing.
Worked on it and wondered. I remember talking about how long it would take us before we'd have all the turf cut away. Because all the turf will never be cut away. I hope. Yeah, and of course you know about bogs. The most important bit, sphagnum moss, is that I see a bit there. But you asked me what I hope for. I hope it's preserved, and quite a number of other ones preserved, and the turf cutting ceases. Now, in my youth, all we had for either cooking or providing heat was turf, nothing else.
And we were born and reared just over there.
Yeah, on the edge of the bog.
On the edge of the bog, yeah.
Peatlands have values from their water storage and for biodiversity, but in recent years we've really focused, we're beginning to focus on peatlands as a carbon store and a habitat that sequesters carbon from our atmosphere. And the simple answers to why peatlands are so good at that is because they're a wetland. And I always tell people is that, if you were going fishing, you'd never come to a bog to look for a worm. So nature's decomposers that we love to see in our woodlands or our grassland habitats, they can't live on this bog because there's no oxygen beneath the surface. So year on year, the peatland plants, as we see around us today, are sequestering carbon. They become part of the bog, and over time they'll form peat, they'll get swallowed by the sphagnum mosses.
You could have a solitary interest, but you won't get the energy or progress until you join as a group, because the group, the old Irish saying, Ní neart go cur le céile, we're better together. And absolutely having like-minded people just lifts you up and encourages you and helps you to believe in your goal.
I had known about the bog, but there was kind of just whisperings of the bog. It was like, oh yeah, the bog's of RD, and you know, there's a football pitch, the RD Celtic out in the bog, and I would have known about that because my boyfriend played there as a kid. So then I thought, okay, well, I'm going to have to explore the bog now that I'm here, and I'm going to be based here for a little while.
Sometimes it happens by happen chance like that. When we were at the Louth Environments Network, I think I was talking on about the bog and the beauty of the bog and looking after it and minding it, and it was total joy to find the heads nodding and people in agreement with me, and then that Fiona shared the same respect and love for the bog, perhaps even more than me. I could see that Fiona had a better knowledge of the bog than I had. So that brought us together because we were like-minded. And then through the Louth Environment Network, other people joined us.
It's really important to have as many different stakeholders involved in peatland restoration as possible, because there isn't just a single group of interested parties here. Yes, there's people who want to conserve it, the NGO workers, the scientists, the government people sometimes who have a responsibility for it, but there's loads of other groups of people that aren't often listened to. The landowners, the people who formerly harvested that peat or mined that peat. There are farmers who live next door who might be worried about their land getting wetter than it was before. And there's various other people who would have used it for years. We also need to think about the past as well, because these peatlands contain our history, a lot of it anyway, buried deep down that we can't always see. The trackways and the bog butter and the bog bodies. And that's there somewhere. We don't quite know where it is yet. It's still going to be there if we leave it there. So we need to think about that, because it reflects our past into our present and then really into our future as well.
One of the ways to me that's really important is that people have access to the bog, that they can come and walk in it and just, you know, come across the butterflies and the plants and the frogs and see how amazing these places, and you know, that they become places that are meaningful to people.
Intergenerational is essential. The way I would see it is we're only as good as the people who are coming after us, and it's like ploughing a furrow. If we plough the furrow, they can come after us in the same furrow and set a seed of respect and love for the bog. So that would be my take on it.
Yeah, it's just sharing it and spending time out here. For me, I have a little 9-year-old boy, so he's out here a lot with his friends, and by degrees the parents come along, and there was a birthday party a few weeks ago, and they were to really buy it. They live close by, but they're not aware of it. So our hopes and dreams are to have an accessible area of the bog that's available for people to, you know, and they feel welcome and they're informed as to what it is and how important it is for us all.
I think we're at the stage now where we know what we're doing, and we know that we need to save the bogs for climate change and also for biodiversity. There are just these little pockets of wilderness in Ireland and in County Meath, which is, you know, a farming, you know, very agricultural county, lots of big green fields and growing, and you've just got this wonderful sort of little patch of wilderness in the middle of it, you know, of raised bog. And I think, you know, I think we need to do a lot more work, you know, in terms of just getting the word out there.
I suppose I'd hope that there'd be more initiative from government bodies and the people who have the resources and I suppose the position to kind of conserve the bogs and really make the most of their potential, because their potential is huge in the context of the climate crisis, like even in terms of sequestering carbon and of course in the context of biodiversity crisis as well. Like, we need the bogs because they just support so much wildlife. So yeah, I suppose just when you get involved in something like Friends of Ardee Bog and you see the kind of thing they're up against, I really love to see that initiative and a real drive. And I'd love to be able to see that kind of sense of urgency that you see in people every day. When you're talking to, like, especially school students, actually, when you go to something like the student strikes, the amount of energy that school students have to kind of take action for the environment is amazing. So you'd just like to see that energy reflected from above, kind of thing. So yeah, that would be my hope.
Climate change is a really strong driver of this. People are starting to realise it now. Unfortunately, climate change is a slow burner, or it has been until quite recently. Now we're starting to see that burn fast, increase in speed. So we have flooding events, we have larger fires, we have droughts that go on for much longer, we have storms that pummel the midlands and flood all these areas. Whereas before, those peatlands would have absorbed a lot of that. And peatlands are part of that. So when we drain them, they dry out, they oxidise, and they pump out all that carbon dioxide into the air. If we can reverse that, then we can start to tackle climate change at a national level. It's a global problem though, so it's really hard to convince people that climate change, or mitigation of that, starts here, starts in Ireland, starts outside your back door if you have peatlands there.
When we look at us today, we are an emergency. It's not a war emergency, but it is an emergency to do with our biodiversity and climate. And our climate and biodiversity emergency, we need to take action for it today. And after all that's happened with our peatlands down through the years, of us taking from the peatlands to help us, here our peatlands are in the 21st century in 2021 saying, I can still help you. We are still connected. But this time it's different. We have to give the bogs something back, and we have to give the bogs back water. It's their lifeblood in the bog, and we can do that through rehabilitation and restoration. And I think communities around Ireland are still connected to our peatlands, but we just need to take all of our learnings over the past 30 years and decide if we're going to take action for our peatlands. And I think there's some great projects going on around Ireland where we have community groups coming together and doing just that, taking action for peatlands.
I'd love to see, at a really high level, investment not just in the actual practical restoration, but in those awareness-raising initiatives, and investment in all the communities on the ground who want to contribute and who want to do work, but it's just can be so hard to access that support sometimes. And so really supporting the communities, really supporting the bogs, and just that places like this are just like it is now, without too much infrastructure and signage, and that like it is now, wild and beautiful, but just a bit wetter.
Once upon a time, nostalgic stories brought to rhyme, fuel for our fires, dressings for our wounds, raising an economy with pure autonomy, a flame to give heat made from peat beneath our feet. Listen as she whispers, look as she reveals the blue moon revelations of a history that was sealed. A tapestry of time secured with stitches so divine. Action from communities, restoration next in line. Reconnecting to a space as it slowly changes face. Systems of decay, damp and badly drained, hardly worth the fuss, it seems all a bit deranged. Until you learn the heart of it, the truth behind the name. A bog is not so standard. A bog is not so bleak. A bog is what we need for the future that we seek. Nurturing, responsive, alive and in need. Now is the time to take heed and sow the seed. Not a victim to pity, no villain to blame. A hero resides in squelching terrain. Generations to come, listen as they hum. A bog is not so standard. A bog is not so bleak. A bog is what we need for the future that we seek.